Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your Thursday, March 10th. Thanks for tuning in for News 3 Now. I'm so happy to have you here with me on this beautiful Thursday. Oh my gosh, it is so gorgeous outside. That sunshine. Am I right? Oh, I do not want it to get cold again. There's a cold front coming as soon as tomorrow. And I'm just going to complain the whole time because it's so beautiful. I'm in a t-shirt today. The sun's out. All right. I'll bear with it. It's fine. We'll get through the weekend. The sun's supposed to be shining, even though it's going to be a little cold. Like I said before, I'm not going to complain if the sun's out. Whatever. Sun's out this weekend. It'll be nice. It'll be fine. A little bit warmer next week, hopefully, for spring break. We'll talk about spring break in a little bit, but let's start with a look at today's headlines. We've got a lot of international news to get through, some local headlines, and then, like I said, we'll talk a little bit about some fun stuff that's happening across the Brazos Valley in the next weekend or week or so during spring break. But hey, I have a question for you. Are gas prices affecting your plans for spring break? Are you going to be driving or flying? And have you kind of had to revamp some of your decisions for your family's spring break trip because of the gas prices right now? We have a reporter working on that story today. So if you have an opinion about this, or you're like, yeah, I actually, I'm not doing this because I don't want to fill up my gas tank 5 times, let us know. Send us a message, KBTX Media. All right, let's start with some breaking news from this morning. The Senate has less than 48 hours to keep the government open. Well, we've heard that before. There's a stopgap bill on the table. The House passed that bill by voice vote last night to extend government funding through Tuesday. The House also passed a massive $1.5 trillion government funding bill that would keep the government open until September. Now, remember, I told you about that deal a little bit earlier this week. Well, the Senate is expected to take up and pass both of the short-term funding extensions and the broader spending bill. The larger bill includes $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine. That money is for defense, economic assistance, and humanitarian aid. There's also $4 billion to help refugees, plus provisions to enforce sanctions against Russia. Now, a little bit more news from the Capitol. Lawmakers overwhelmingly approved legislation last night that would ban Russian oil imports to the U.S. This move from Congress would go a little bit further than the White House's ban on Russian oil. The bill encourages a full review of Russia's status in the World Trade Organization. It also signals U.S. support for sanctions on Russian officials over human rights violations. The legislation now goes to the Senate. Well, all of this, gas prices are hitting record levels. Feels like I tell you that every single day. Well, AAA says that the average now is $4.25 a gallon. Here in Texas, it's a little bit lower at $3.93. And here in BCS, it's just 1 cent below that. Now, these prices are expected to continue to creep up. If you're looking for ways to cut down on that cost, well, there's not much we can do, but AAA reminds us to make sure our tires aren't underinflated. Go fill up your tires. Apparently, that can decrease gas mileage by up to about 10%. And some news out of Texas A&M. The Chancellor, John Sharp, is directing all universities and colleges in the Texas A&M system to sever ties with Russian entities. A memo was sent out to all system CEOs. Sharp says they should dissolve all agreements, quote, specifically those relating to academics, research, and intellectual property. Now, according to the Texas Tribune, system leaders said there are fewer than 10 research agreements across the entire system. They do not believe the move will have a significant impact on the 11 individual universities. Now, over in Ukraine, gunfire continues to ring out peaceful streets as heavily armed Ukrainian troops battle with advancing Russian forces. Civilians and children were trapped under wreckage after an airstrike hit a children's and maternity hospital. As Russian forces appear to be escalating their attacks on civilians, the White House is now warning that Russia could use chemical weapons in Ukraine. Well, at least 18 healthcare providers have now been hit by Russian attacks since the start of the conflict, including that maternity and children's hospital in the coastal city of Mariupol. One U.S. official estimates up to 6,000 Russian troops may have been killed so far, 2 weeks into the war. Vice President Kamala Harris is actually in Poland's capital of Warsaw today, where more than 1 million Ukrainians have now crossed the border to escape the fighting. The vice president announced that the United States is giving $50 million to help those refugees. Christina Ruffini has more.
The train station in Przemyśl is full of unexpected departures, missed connections, and delays. But in a crowded corner, armed with a cardboard sign and Google Translate,
Russian to English,
U.S. Army Captain Sebastian Connor is carrying out his self-appointed mission, finding rooms for refugees in transit.
The only way I could think of to actually help these people was to get hotels and put them in a place where they could get a hot shower and a bed.
So this is how you're spending your vacation?
Now it is. Yeah.
Connor was on leave in Poland, visiting the Nazi death camp at Treblinka when the Russian assault happened. Instead of taking his planned flight to Ireland, he grabbed a train to this town near the Ukrainian border and started booking every hotel room he could find.
I saw that human tragedy, I saw this unfolding, and I was like, I can't do nothing. It doesn't make any sense.
These 4 women and 6-year-old Adam came from Kyiv. Their train for Warsaw didn't leave until the next day, so instead of sleeping at the station, they followed Connor about 15 minutes through cold cobblestone streets to this hostel.
Thank you.
Where they get 4 beds, free of charge. Did you think you would have to leave?
No, I did. Even yesterday, I didn't know if I should leave or I should stay. Yes.
In the face of overwhelming uncertainty, knowing where they're going to sleep tonight, they said helps. And for this night, that's enough. Now, Connor had to go. His leave is over, but he's handed the effort over to some local Polish volunteers who are going to help fill the hotel rooms he has booked up. He's also got a GoFundMe account that's raised more than $3,000. Christina Ruffini, CBS News, Rzeszów, Poland.
Church leaders from multiple denominations will be hosting a prayer service together for the people of Ukraine. The service will be held at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Bryan today. That service is happening from noon, so you got about an hour to get over there, until 2 o'clock. This will include multiple speakers, and anyone is welcome to attend.
Pastors from different denominations will be present, and we will offer prayer. There'll be some singing, as well as readings from the Bible.
The goal of the service is to promote unity and peace. Governor Abbott says that this Sunday, March 13th, is also a day of prayer for Ukraine. A Russian Orthodox church just outside of downtown Bryan is a place where local Ukrainian and Russian families come together to worship. News 3's Andy Krause spoke with the church's priest and a member of the congregation about the relationship between the war and services.
The life-giving spring of the Mother of God Orthodox Church is tucked away on a quiet street in Bryan where most wouldn't expect to find a house of worship. But that's where 8 or 9 families go on a regular basis to practice their faith. Both Russian and Ukrainian families are part of Father Cassian Sibley's congregation.
The liturgy that we serve every Sunday morning was written in the late 4th century, about 500 years before Christianity arrived in Russia.
Father Cassian says the church has been in the community for about 17 years now. He says while Russian and Ukrainian families face different emotions and hardships in response to the war, there's no rift in his congregation.
All of them agree that this is a disaster. So in some sense that makes it easier because, you know, for each and every one of them there's somebody that they love who's in Ukraine.
Maria Kamilienko is a dual Russian-American citizen who's lived in College Station almost 7 years now. She's been attending the church with her husband, a Ukrainian with Russian citizenship, and their 3 kids since then. She says services have done a lot of good, helping her cope with all the fear.
I think that if not for services, I would have gone crazy probably because it's so hard right now. And also, there are so many people to pray for right now because we cannot help them physically. I mean, we can only think of them and pray for them, including our relatives and friends.
In Bryan, Andy Krause, News 3.
Well, Maria has family in Russia, while her husband's family lives in western Ukraine. She says the fear she feels for her family every day is unbearable. Yet another major financial blow to Russia. Goldman Sachs announcing this morning it is no longer doing business in Russia. That makes Goldman Sachs the first major Wall Street bank to leave Russia since it invaded Ukraine. A spokesperson said the move is, quote, in compliance with regulatory and licensing requirements. It's unclear how many people the bank employs in Russia or how much money it makes there. Citigroup has also announced plans to halt consumer business in Russia, but is still supporting corporate clients there that include many U.S. and European companies. White House staffers are bracing themselves for potentially bad news today, a rise in the Consumer Price Index. The key report on inflation is expected to be released first thing this morning. Now, last month's report showed inflation near a 40-year high. The Biden administration says it's taking steps to help ease that inflation. Those include addressing shortages in the semiconductor space, as well as fixing supply chain bottlenecks at ports. And the Biden administration is canceling more than $6 billion worth of federal student loan debt. Maybe yours. Fortunately, not mine, but maybe yours. The Department of Education says it's identified 100,000 borrowers eligible for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. The program launched 15 years ago, but the Biden administration made changes to it back in October. Now, some borrowers have until October of this year to apply for that forgiveness. Let's talk about the teacher shortage in the state of Texas. Roughly 6 out of 10 new teachers hired each year are replacing teachers that left the classroom before retirement. To retain quality teachers and staff, College Station ISD just recently approved a retention stipend for the upcoming school year. Eligible teachers will receive $2,000. Other campus professionals, $1,000. New teachers could be eligible for a $1,500 sign-on bonus.
We know that the season for resignations is fixing to start, and area districts are so competitive. So we are anticipating probably a lot of positions to fill this summer.
College Station ISD says the bonuses will be paid out in 2 installments starting next school year. And some good news on the economic front here in the Brazos Valley. Some representatives from about a dozen Belgian technology companies are here in town meeting with our local companies and leaders across the Brazos Valley. That's in an effort to showcase the advantages to doing business in the Lone Star State and right here at home.
We've got a great university with great intellectual property, great talent, and we want to do business. If you want to launch a business from Belgium and go into New York City, you don't know where to begin. Here, we've got an international gateway which takes people by the hand, shows them how to start the business.
That's what we are telling them, is that they will have a partner, and Brazos Valley has been an extraordinary partner for us over the years, and we cannot thank them enough. It's not only the university, it's Brazos Valley, it's the Economic Development Corporation who understands.
The businesses will be holding meetings over the next couple of days. Closing arguments in the Bret Black capital murder trial began this morning in Bryan. The defense has rested their case. Black's lawyers claim he acted in self-defense when he shot and killed Trooper Damon Allen in 2017. They say he felt threatened when he saw another trooper responding to the traffic stop for backup. The jury heard from law enforcement rebuttal witnesses for the state yesterday. They testified that Black had previously attempted to flee from officers in separate incidents in East Texas. In 2016, DPS used spike strips to stop him. A year later, he crashed into a Smith County deputy's vehicle. That deputy's career in law enforcement was ended due to injuries from that crash. Rapper Travis Scott has announced a $5 million community initiative in the wake of the deadly crowd surge at his November 6th Astroworld Festival concert. 10 people died and hundreds more were severely injured in that surge. Scott said today his Project Heal will give $1 million in academic scholarships to historically black colleges and universities. It will also include free mental health resources and create a creative design education program at a nonprofit center in Houston. And Scott said it will fund a new device that's currently in development that will use technology for event safety. North Zolch ISD students are learning the consequences of reckless driving through real-life scenarios. Students participated in the Shattered Dreams program, which brings students face-to-face with a realistic deadly crash. A representative with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension says it's important for students to experience this because it can happen to anyone. The AgriLife Extension also reports 11 people in the 15 to 25 age range have been seriously injured from a crash, and 2 have died in Madison County over the last 3 years.
I hope with programs like this that when these students see this, that they won't make that bad decision to drink and drive or drive distracted or have distractions in the vehicle.
It paints a real picture of the risk factors of driving impaired, driving distracted, not wearing your seatbelt, driving drowsy, trying to street race. Those are all the big 5 common factors that kill our kids.
Kovar also says rural areas are affected more by serious crashes than urban areas, partly because of the lack of nearby medical facilities. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is suing the Biden administration once again, this time over federal guidance that highlights protections for pediatric gender-affirming care. Paxton's legal stance is that gender-affirming procedures in children should be considered child abuse. Federal guidance announced last week cautioned that healthcare providers who report families seeking gender-affirming care or refuse treatment may be violating federal law. A Texas appeals court voted yesterday to uphold a judge's ruling that stops an investigation into the parents of a transgender teen. A hearing is scheduled for tomorrow to discuss stopping all investigations into all Texas parents of trans children who have undergone gender-affirming treatments. Meanwhile, Disney says it will spend millions of dollars in support of LGBTQ rights after the company publicly failed to respond to Florida passing the so-called Don't Say Gay bill. Disney CEO Bob Chapek said that the lack of a public statement does not equate a lack of support. Chapek and LGBTQ+ leaders in his company plan to meet with Governor Ron DeSantis to discuss their concerns about the legislation. The bill would limit discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in all Florida schools. DeSantis said that he will sign it into law. And moving forward to the COVID-19 front, Pfizer now testing a COVID-19 antiviral treatment for children. The drug company says it's started the 2nd and 3rd phases for Paxlovid in kids aged 6 to 17. The FDA already authorized Paxlovid for high-risk people who are 12 and older and weigh at least 88 pounds. And a new study confirms that we need a booster shot to be fully protected against the Omicron variant. The effectiveness of just 2 primary doses is a little bit less, not as effective at preventing hospitalization against Omicron compared to the original strain and Delta variants. But hey, 3 doses were found to boost effectiveness against Omicron more than 85%. According to the Brazos County Health District, there's been a dramatic dip in COVID-19 cases as more and more families are getting vaccinated. The district reports that a little more than half of the Brazos Valley is now fully vaccinated. Whether staying in town during spring break or traveling, the district still encourages getting vaccinated and maintaining social distancing if you can.
We don't want to see a huge spike because people have let their guard down too much. If you're going to be indoors and in a very crowded place, it's still wise to wear a mask, especially if you haven't been vaccinated yet.
Well, for those who still want to get vaccinated, the health district offers both adult and children vaccines. More information by clicking on this story on our website, kvtx.com. Brazos County commissioners are moving forward in determining the feasibility of a medical examiner's office. A study was conducted by the Brazos Valley Council of Governments back in 2015. Commissioners hope to learn the facility size and staff that will be needed to keep up with the region's growth. Commissioners are also interested in how the new facility could partner with other agencies in our region. Based on the report released in 2015, the project is expected to cost anywhere between $5 and $14 million. No date has been set for when the new report could be released. Now, all right, this next story is a good one. A family of Aggies has spent the last decade building a gift for others out of their own traumatic loss. News 3's Morgan Rydell spoke with a donor mother who continues keeping her child's memory alive.
Taylor's gift was created after Aggie Tara Storch lost her daughter in a skiing accident.
We were met with a huge group of doctors who let us know she was not going to survive, and our world collapsed. And then shortly after, a nurse approached us in the hospital and said she's a beautiful candidate for organ donation, and would we consider it?
Taylor's memory survives through that gift and the family's work helping other donor families. Dr. Macy Levan at New York University has been working with the family on a new pilot program after seeing gaps in donor family care.
One thing that we can do that is not being done is give them grief counseling and support opportunities outside of the traditional things that we've determined exist.
Levan said including previous donor families in the grief process helps guide understanding, including what to expect next.
Really listening to the voices of the donor family members to see how we can make their experiences better and how they can be better vehicles for understanding new things in donation and transplant.
Storch hopes to make sure no donor family grieves alone or pays for counseling.
We wanted to be there for these families because we know what they've been through. We've walked it.
In College Station, Morgan Rydell, News 3.
Now, I was actually in the room for this conversation between Morgan and Ms. Storch, and Storch kept emphasizing how important it is to have discussions about organ donation with your family members before they're asked to make that decision during a traumatic time. For more information on how to have these conversations, visit kbtx.com. All right, y'all, that was pretty heart-wrenching, so let's move on to a story that I hope will make all of you feel really great. The pandemic, as we know, caused a lot of people to reevaluate their careers, and millions of others were literally forced out in what's being called the Great Resignation. But it isn't stopping. New numbers show 4.3 million people have quit or changed their jobs in the month of January. That's exactly what happened to former media exec Ron King. He had to say goodbye to his high-powered role, but as CBS's lead national correspondent David Begnaud discovered, in losing his job, he found himself in a very unexpected place, surrounded by donkeys.
Among the coastal hills of Northern California, right in the middle of wine country.
My favorite part of my day is my donkey hunt.
Ron King has created a donkey sanctuary.
It's the weight of the head that lets you know he is like happy.
This is so sweet.
This 75-acre ranch is a nonprofit dedicated to their rescue and rehabilitation.
They're intelligent and they have very high emotional intelligence. I give them love and they give me love back. I'm a donkey guy now.
It's a far cry from his pre-pandemic life, attired in Gucci, shuttling between New York and Los Angeles. As a senior VP for Time Inc., he managed sales and marketing for some well-known brands.
Was there a moment in your life where you thought, damn, I've made it?
Yeah, I think it was when, I was flying first class to Milan to sit front row at Versace. That was a big deal.
But in 2018, the sale of Time led to the elimination of King's position. So he freelanced, but then COVID hit. The work dried up, and the despair set in. Then came a call from an old friend, Phil Selway, a prominent pop art dealer. He hired Ron to move to his ranch and sell it because it wasn't being used.
I thought it would be a win-win. He could help me tremendously, and it would help him, give him another project.
King took the job, and while hiking around the property, he felt something new, this sense of calm.
My head is always like a snow globe that's being shook. It never stops. That sense of sort of chaos in my head was just normal for me. When the snow globe stops after 20 years, you feel that.
But you were still enough to recognize it.
I was still enough to recognize it.
And respectful enough to act on it.
I had no thoughts in my head except this beautiful surrounding, and I realized it was the first time I'd felt serenity in 20 years.
Well, serenity met serendipity. King discovered a story about the plight of donkeys, known historically as strong pack animals capable of hauling goods. But they've outlived their usefulness. So donkeys, which can live around 30 years, are sold at auction, slaughtered, and then skinned for their hides to be used for traditional Chinese medicine.
They don't have any advocates, they don't win races, they don't feed a food chain. And I thought, I need to help donkeys. So I said, Phil, I have an idea that I want to run by you. I want you to take it off the market, not sell it, and let me turn this into a donkey sanctuary.
That sounds bananas.
And he will tell you, he also said it sounded bananas.
The first thing I thought when Ron was giving this presentation was that he was crazy and I would be crazy to go along with this. It's absolutely blown me away, and I could not be happier.
Donations support their cause. Every donkey here, 97 of them while we were there, would have been killed.
Patches was dying of starvation, so nobody had fed him for who knows how long. The only way to help a donkey that's been abused emotionally recover is to love it back to health. And I had this moment where I realized that there's a difference between things that I enjoy and things that bring me joy. And I was 52 years old when I realized those were two different things. It's a whole different way of living. You will never be this sick again.
And in helping donkeys to heal, he may be healing his own invisible scars. King's struggles began at an early age, when this son of a Southern Baptist preacher first realized he was gay.
They were young and they were religious and they had a little sissy boy. So that didn't go well. All I really wanted all along was to matter. Come on.
By his 20s, he was homeless, addicted to drugs and alcohol. He got sober only after surviving an overdose. Understanding the power of resilience.
You wanted to take the donkeys hiking?
Yes, sir. Keep these guys fit.
King rebuilds the donkey's strength and trust so that they're ready for adoption. So far, he's found forever homes for 30 of them.
For a long time, proving that I could be someone or be something motivated me. That part has gone. But I want to matter to the world, to the donkeys, to people.
We have so many snuggle sessions.
Amber Paz made 2 of his donkeys part of her family.
This is my dream come true.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who dreamed of a donkey.
They're just absolutely precious.
For Paz, it was love at first sight.
She laid down right next to us. I went, "You're mine." I went into this not knowing how to do all this, but if I can do it, anyone can do it. Run, run!
There is no denying the connection that donkeys form with people. You know, changing lives may be a heavy burden for a lot of people, but it is a load that these animals seem to haul with grace.
I was pretty accomplished by all those standards, and I found myself with the rug pulled out from under me. And for that level of despair to be so close, so recent, is really an important lesson in resilience and turnaround. Good morning. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not always a freight train. Sometimes it's donkeys.
David Begno, CDS News.
Whew, all right, now I'm checking in one more time with those MLB fans, baseball fans. You good? How are you? Let's check in. 93 more MLB games will be canceled this season. Ay, ay, ay. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred announced another wave of regular season cancellations yesterday. Opening day has now been postponed until at least April 14th, which means another 2 series for each team has been canceled. Manfred made the announcement after the sides fought over several issues, most prominently the international draft and qualifying offer. It wasn't immediately clear if those series that are canceled can be rescheduled as doubleheaders or maybe through some other maneuvers. Baseball fans, check in with us. Are you okay? I know you're not alive and well, but you're alive. You're okay. We're going to get through it. Baseball is going to happen. I'm crossing my fingers because I don't actually know that, but I sure hope so. All right, here's a cute story to cheer you up. You're about to meet a cat who's definitely only got 8 lives left. Dorothy the cat managed to survive a tornado by hiding in a shed that actually got completely leveled by the tornado. Lauren Johnson has that story.
How she survived it, I don't know.
In a stroke of pure luck, Patty Arnold's cat Dorothy rode out Saturday's tornado in her she shed. This is all that's left of the shed on her farm in Humiston. The only battle scars the cat has is her fur matted in mud, sticks, and debris.
I'm sure it was terrifying for her, but she doesn't seem to mind it now.
Arnold had just a few moments to find shelter as an EF2 tornado tore through her property. Barns and farm equipment are now reduced to piles of rubble.
This was our cattle shed out here. And it completely came down.
Arnold says their horse trailer and dumpster were carried about a quarter of a mile away in the storm, and her she shed was found on the other side of the street. She says she may never know how Dorothy survived this storm, but a catastrophe has been averted.
Because the only thing left is the door laying on the ground and the floor. So I don't know how she did it. God was with her too.
Okay, and in case you were wondering, the cat has actually been renamed Dorothy, obviously, because of the Wizard of Oz, right? So its original name was not Dorothy, but now it's Dorothy because of the ordeal that she went through. Even if her home is in Iowa and not Kansas, that cat is forever going to be Dorothy from the Wizard of Oz. All right, hippie bus. Yeah, the iconic VW bus is back, and unlike its noisy predecessor, this one is fully electric. Volkswagen has unveiled the production version of the ID Buzz, a 21st century version of the classic VW bus. It's going on sale in Europe later this year, and in America, we don't know yet, but it became associated with the hippie movement, as we know, but also provided transportation for large families. Decades before the minivan was invented, the ID Buzz VW bus is going to be available here, all right, in North America in 2024. Pretty cool. I love that. Well, if you are an online dater, I've got good news. Tinder is adding background checks. Starting this week, users of the dating app will see a background check tool in the app's safety center. It's part of a partnership between Tinder's parent company, Match Group, and Garbo, a nonprofit background check provider focused on gender-based violence awareness and prevention. Garbo currently searches public records of arrests, convictions, and sex offender registries across the U.S. where accessible. Tinder is giving users 2 free background checks to start. Garbo says it has more than 1 billion records of violent and harmful behavior. Well, for non-Tinder users or subsequent searches, people can buy 1, 3, or 5 credits from Garbo for $2.50 each, plus a processing fee. The company warns that most violent people never interact with the criminal justice system, so it doesn't want to create a false sense of security. Instead, the background check is part of its overall mission to educate and support people on gender-based violence. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. Lululemon taking its first step into the shoe business. The company announced it is releasing a running shoe called Blissfeel. This is the first shoe that Lululemon has released. The sneaker costs $148. It comes in 10 different colors. It's apparently designed to focus on the unmet needs of active women. The company says the new shoe will be available for purchase starting March 22nd in select stores as well as online. Lululemon says a different line of footwear for men will be coming out next year. All right, raise your hand if you snore at night. Nope, not me, I don't snore. If you snore, this is for you. If snoring is keeping you up at night, don't worry, you're not alone. 46% of respondents in a new survey said snoring, either their partner's or their own, has affected their daily routines. The survey found that 57% of men admit to being a snorer, compared to just 46% of women. According to the survey, the worst snorers in the U.S. can be found in the Northeast, but the overnight noise happens everywhere. The study also finds a growl is the most common way people have had their snoring described to them. Other sounds included a chainsaw, a roar, and even Darth Vader. All right. Snoring like Darth Vader. All right, some wild stories coming up next. A cow on the loose turned a packed West Coast highway into a Wild West rodeo show. Jeremy Roth has today's Take a Look at This.
A traffic situation involving a wayward cow on a SoCal highway can only be described as utterly crazy. And that's no bull. Hope you like cow puns, everybody, because here we go. The stakes were high on the 210 freeway in Los Angeles when the beefy livestock went on the lam, flanked by emergency officials in a hot-to-trot but not exactly fleet-of-foot pursuit.
The cow's going as fast as it can right now, which is about 3 miles per hour.
Real quick, what's with the plastic horse? Maybe it was a high steed pursuit. But before Caltrans had to change its move-over law to a move-over law, officials were able to direct the highway heifer to a parking lot where multiple attempts to lasso the animal failed.
It's gone from a pursuit to the rodeo.
Eventually, it was steered towards a nearby ranch where a roper's bovine intervention ended a wild scene that was very rare, or at least medium rare. Speaking of rarities, scientists are puzzled by the discovery of a 400-year-old hunting bow that was found in Alaska's Lake Clark National Park and Preserve. The 54-inch bow, carbon dated to around 1562, was found in 2 feet of water and very well preserved, possibly by the cold and lack of oxygen. However, the suspected origins of the bow versus the known indigenous inhabitants of the area have left experts with unanswered questions about how it got there.
It's very rare. It's very rare for us to come across material like this.
Or take a look at this. I'm Jeremy Roth.
All right, how about a little bit of fun breaking news? There is a new Bluebell ice cream flavor that is sweet as a peach. No, literally. Bluebell is releasing Peachy Peach ice cream in stores today. The peach ice cream has chunks of peaches in it. Bluebell introduced the flavor back in 2012, but only in the 3-gallon size that you see, at ice cream shops. Well, Peachy Peach is now available in the half-gallon and pint sizes for a very limited time. All right, y'all, I have big news, and it comes from our GM here at KBTX. She just messaged us and said that Bluebell delivered Peachy Peach to our break room. So right after the show today, your girl is going to go try that. I cannot wait. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream? I don't know if we've ever talked about our favorite flavors of ice cream here, but what is your favorite flavor of ice cream? Let me know. Mine's cookie dough. What is yours? Well, all right, we're getting into spring break time here. I know it's going to be a little chilly over the weekend, but next week, gorgeous. Like, I'm talking maybe in the 70s even. It's going to be great for spring break. The Children's Museum of the Brazos Valley wants to let kids travel around the world without ever having to leave town. Pretty cool. The museum is hosting the ultimate staycation during spring break week. Each day, families will get to explore different traditions, music, and literature from various countries.
Well, I think it's just great to be able to show children the arts and culture and activities of other countries from right here in Bryan College Station.
I love this. The week-long adventure will kick off Monday at Century Square with programs that begin at 9:30 a.m. Families can purchase kits that are filled with fun projects the kids can do at home. You can find a full list of events for next week with this story at kbtx.com. Speaking of the springtime, one thing that I am so looking forward to this spring is seeing all of the beautiful wildflowers here, especially the blue bonnets. It is going to be my first spring in Texas, and I am stoked. News 3's Fallon Appleton gives us a preview of an upcoming event that my fellow flower lovers will, well, love.
Spring is about here in Texas. One of those great elements about it is the bluebonnets and all of the gorgeous wildflowers all across the area. And coming up in April, there's an event where you can come and celebrate them over at Boonville Heritage Park. And to talk more about that is Garrett. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be on the show. I'm super excited.
Yeah, so you'll have Wildflower Day. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Well, Wildflower Day, it's been a hot minute since we've been able to have an event. So we're super excited to get back in there and show everybody what we've got to offer. Wildflower Day is very specifically about the art of wildflowers. There will be some history as well as some science as well, but we really focus on the art and how beautiful wildflowers are here in Texas.
Absolutely breathtaking. There's so many types of varieties here. Y'all are going to give kids the opportunity to paint. Let's talk about the whole entire day. What can people expect?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, for the kiddos, we will offer watercolors as the watercolor painting supplies that you're going to need, as well as a canvas. They can walk around anywhere they want, wherever they're inspired, sit down and start painting. If you are an adult, we do ask, you're more than welcome to bring your own art supplies and paint whenever you feel inspired to do so.
And y'all are going to have some photographers, things like that, where people enjoy the whole entire day.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we'll have some photographers to kind of get those memories that you kind of want out in the beautiful wildflowers that are out there. There will also be, I mean, you're more than welcome to take pictures wherever you'd like as well. We're going to have some coloring pages, a guide. The guide doesn't do all 5,000 wildflowers here in Texas, but it's all the wildflowers that you're going to find out at Boonville.
And a lot of the big favorites that everybody loves.
Yes, ma'am.
And the last thing, history.
Sure.
If people haven't been out to the park and seen all of that, it's a great opportunity to do that.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's Boonville's where it all started. So if you have questions about history while you're out there, there will be people out there that will be able to answer those questions. The cabins will be open. We'll have hopefully a couple of different music options that will be out there from the time period, so we're excited about it.
Definitely a fun time. Now, when are the times and the date for this event?
Yes, ma'am. So it's April 9th, and it starts at 10 o'clock, and it ends at 2 o'clock, and it will be out at Boonville Heritage Park.
All right, well, Garrett, thank you so much for all of this great information. It's going to be a fun time in April to come out and enjoy those gorgeous wildflowers. We'll send it back to you in studio.
All right, well, a couple of things that we're looking ahead to in the 12 o'clock hour. The first being that Vice President Harris is going to be holding a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. They are both in Warsaw, Poland. Again, that's coming up at about 12 o'clock. One more thing happening in that 12 o'clock hour. Ambassadors in Washington, D.C., Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin, co-chair of the Senate Ukraine Caucus, and the Senator Jian Shaheen, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Europe and Security, are hosting key European ambassadors to brief the Democratic caucus on what's happening in Ukraine. So the ambassadors of the EU, Poland, Germany, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, the Netherlands, Finland, and the deputy ambassador of the UK are all going to be in attendance in Washington, D.C. The ambassador of France joining in by Zoom. Now, there was also going to be a little bit of kind of what we call in the business kind of like a photo spray, right? So we don't know if it's going to be a completely public, like a press conference type of event, but that's happening in Washington, D.C., again, during the 12 o'clock hour. So we'll take us live to Washington, D.C., see what's happening there, see if we can tune in if there's any sound to listen to at the top of that meeting with the European ambassadors. So that's what's happening at about 12 o'clock, both of those things. One more thing happening during the 12 o'clock hour. It's a lot. White House Press Secretary Jenn Saki also going to be giving that daily White House update. I'm sure talking a whole lot about the Ukraine-Russia crisis, so we can tune in live to all of those things as they start to come up. This is what we're looking at now. Obviously, this is in the speaker's room at the White House. A live shot over the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., where the ambassadors are right now. So as those live streams start to pop up, if we're able to, we're going to tune in live. Now, one more thing coming up today at about 1 o'clock. We'll see if it happens on time. Governor Abbott going to be speaking about border security from Weslaco, Texas. Again, we're not exactly sure where we're going to find that feed. I've explained to y'all how it works a little bit. We're not actually in Weslaco, obviously. So one of our other media stations down there would have to then share the feed with us. If we're able to take that live, we'll absolutely take that live at the end of our show as well. So just a couple things to keep in mind as you're kind of planning ahead if you want to pop out for a nice deep breath in the fresh air with the sunshine, or you want to grab some lunch, or maybe a bite of that new Peachy Peach Bluebell ice cream, which is what I'm going to do after the show today. But I'm just telling you, in the next 15 minutes or so, all of those things are going to hopefully start happening about at 12 o'clock. So we'll try to kind of go in and out of some of them, and I'll re-explain what's happening before I take us live to DC, to Poland, wherever it might be. Well, so for any of our folks who are just now tuning in for this last 15 minutes or so of News 3 Now in this first half, we're going to talk a little bit about Ukraine crisis, because that's on everyone's minds, and that's the biggest story of the day, of course. Let's talk first about funding. The Senate, with less than 48 hours to keep the government open. Seems like we've heard that story quite a few times lately. There's a stopgap bill on the table. Now, the House passed that bill last night to extend government funding through Tuesday. The House also passing a massive $1.5 trillion government funding bill that would keep the government open until September. Now, I told you about that deal a little bit earlier this week. The Senate now expected to take up and pass both of those short-term funding extension bills and that broader spending bill as well. Now, talking about that larger spending bill, that includes $13.6 billion in aid to Ukraine. That money is used for defense, for economic assistance, for humanitarian aid. There's also $4 billion in there to help refugees, plus provisions to enforce sanctions against Russia. And some more news out of the Capitol I told you about this morning. Lawmakers overwhelmingly approved legislation late last night that would ban Russian oil imports to the United States. Now, this move from Congress goes a little bit further than the White House's ban on Russian oil. This bill encourages a full review of Russia's status in the World Trade Organization. It also signals U.S. support for sanctions on Russian officials over human rights violations. Legislation now goes on over to the Senate. Talking a lot about gas prices. I've seen some funny things talking about how, you know, we hate talking about gas prices, but at least I now have a new topic for small talk conversations, right? We talk about traffic, we talk about weather, we talk about, you know, how's your family, whatever, and small talk conversations. Now we can add gas prices. With all of this happening, gas prices once again hitting record levels. AAA says the average is now $4.25 a gallon. Now, Texas is just a little bit lower than that at $3.93. Here in BCS, it's just 1 cent below that. These prices are expected to continue to go up. But if you're looking for ways to cut down on that cost, well, there's not much that we can do, but AAA does remind us to make sure that our tires aren't underinflated. Apparently, you can actually decrease gas mileage by up to 10% by having your tires filled up correctly. That's good advice. Now, in terms of Texas A&M, Chancellor John Sharp announcing that he's directing all universities and colleges in the system to sever ties with Russian entities. A memo was sent out to all system CEOs. Sharp says they should dissolve all agreements, quote, specifically those relating to academics, research, and intellectual property. According to the Texas Tribune, system leaders said there are fewer than 10 research agreements really across the entire system, so they don't believe that the move will have a significant impact on the individual universities. Now, we know that over in Ukraine, gunfire continuing to ring out in once peaceful streets, that heavily armed Ukrainian troops are battling with advancing Russian forces, civilians and children getting trapped under wreckage of airstrikes. We saw that the airstrike happened at a children's and maternity hospital, while as Russian forces appear to be escalating their attacks on civilians. The White House is now warning that Russia could use chemical weapons in Ukraine. And we're talking about that children's and maternity ward. At least 18 healthcare providers have now been hit by Russian attacks since the start of the conflict. One U.S. official estimates up to 6,000 Russian troops may have been killed so far 2 weeks into the war. Vice President Kamala Harris, like I said, is actually in Poland's capital, Warsaw, right now, where more than 1 million Ukrainians have now crossed the border to escape the fighting. The Vice President announced that the U.S. is giving $50 million to help those refugees. Let's learn a little bit more.
The train station in Shemesh is full of unexpected departures, missed connections, and delays. But in a crowded corner, armed with a cardboard sign and Google Translate,
Russian to English.
U.S. Army Captain Sebastian Connor is carrying out his self-appointed mission, finding rooms for refugees in transit.
The only way I could think of to actually help these people was to get hotels and put them in a place where they could get a hot shower and a bed.
So this is how you're spending your vacation?
Now it is. Yeah.
Connor was on leave in Poland, visiting the Nazi death camp at Treblinka when the Russian assault happened. Instead of taking his planned flight to Ireland, he grabbed a train to this town near the Ukrainian border and started booking every hotel room he could find.
I saw that human tragedy, I saw this unfolding, and I was like, I can't do nothing. It doesn't make any sense.
These 4 women and 6-year-old Adam came from Kyiv. Their train for Warsaw didn't leave until the next day, so instead of sleeping at the station, they followed Connor about 15 minutes through cold cobblestone streets to this hostel, where they get 4 beds, free of charge. Did you think you would have to leave?
No, I did. Even yesterday, I didn't know if I should leave or I should stay. Yes.
In the face of overwhelming uncertainty, knowing where they're going to sleep tonight, they said helps. And for this night, that's enough. Now, Connor had to go, his leave is over, but he's handed the effort over to some local Polish volunteers who are going to help fill the hotel rooms he has booked up. He's also got a GoFundMe account that's raised more than $3,000. Christina Raffini, CBS News, Rzeszów, Poland.
All right, y'all, just getting some updates here on some of those live feeds that we're looking at. Now, I told you before that Vice President Kamala Harris is in Poland right now meeting with the Canadian President Justin Trudeau. I also told you that White House Press Secretary Jenn Saki about to do her weekly press conference. Now, there's also several European ambassadors meeting with representatives of our Senate, of our House, at the Capitol building today, taking a live look. It looks like a beautiful day in Washington, D.C., but that's what we're watching out for. Again, that's all supposed to be happening around the 12 o'clock hour today. You know what else is happening around the 12 o'clock hour that I wanted to tell you all about? You still have a little bit of time to make it over there. This is really, really cool. Church leaders from multiple denominations in our community are hosting a prayer service together for the people of Ukraine. Now, the service is being held at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Bryan, happening today from 12 to 2 p.m. It will include multiple speakers, and of course, anyone is welcome to attend. This is going to be really awesome. The goal of this service is to promote unity and peace. Now, we heard from Governor Abbott declaring that this Sunday, March 13th, is also a day of prayer for Ukraine. Whew. All right, well, looking ahead to the rest of the week, and by, wow, the rest of the week, I mean just tomorrow, some fun stuff coming up tomorrow, trying to line up some interviews for all of that. First and foremost, Texas Ranger Day happening on Saturday in Burton, Texas. Sounds like it's going to be a heck of a good time. We're going to be talking to someone from the museum and the Heritage Society later today. I'm going to get the whole rundown, the whole shebang of what's happening on Saturday. Bring that interview to you tomorrow. One more thing is, you guys have heard from President of the Brazos Valley Coalition on Suicide Prevention, Mr. Doug Vance, on the show a couple of times. Well, a very exciting news that BVCOSP was actually just awarded Best Suicide Prevention Council in the state of Texas. It's a huge award for all of the outreach and community service they do here in the Brazos Valley. So meeting with Doug tomorrow morning, bring that interview to you tomorrow as well. One more thing happening tomorrow. Tomorrow is Veterans Buddy Day, which basically is a day for veterans to reach out to other veterans and just check on them, just see how they're doing, right? And I thought, well, Friday is perfect for that because we do our mental health check-in here on News 3 Now. So what better time to talk about veterans and checking up on our veterans? We have so many vets here across the Brazos Valley that have given so much to our country, to our community, and especially with everything that's happening around the world today. I think tomorrow is a very, very important day to talk about mental health, especially as it relates to our veterans in the community. So exciting stuff happening tomorrow, just working to try to line all of that up. First thing that we're going to go live to now is going to be the White House Press Secretary Jenn Psaki. Let's listen in, see if she has anything to say about the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Now, if there are other live feeds, say Vice President Kamala Harris in Poland, that come up in the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to take that feed live as well. So I'll be right here watching the switcher and making sure that we take those feeds live. I'll see you right back here at 12:30 for the rest of News 3 Now.
Weapons program. So the objective was to make clear the inaccuracy of the information, the misinformation they're trying to put out, and make clear to the world that they not only have the capacity, they have a history of using chemical and biological weapons, and that in this moment we should have our eyes open for that possibility.
Would use of chemical or biological weapons be a red line for the president in terms of direct U.S. involvement in the war over there?
We are directly involved. We are providing $1 billion in security assistance. We are the largest provider of that. We are providing humanitarian. With the U.S. military going and engaging in Ukraine and fighting a war against Russia, we don't have any intention to do that. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Dorothy. Go ahead. Last one.
One other one. The Defense Intelligence Agency, the director told Congress today that his agency underestimated the Ukrainian military's preparedness and will to fight. Is that the assessment? Does the White House share that assessment?
We do, and I think, Darlene, the world does. I mean, I think when we saw the preparations of President Putin and the Russian military on the borders of Ukraine, we saw the power of the Russian military, we saw the intentions of President Putin, and I don't think anyone anticipated the level of courage, of bravery, of capacity to fight back that we have seen in the country. At the same time, we've also seen some miscalculations by President Putin as well in terms of that capacity and willingness, but also in terms of their own planning and logistics of their military.
And then lastly, can you just talk a little bit about the fate of the COVID money, the $15 billion that Speaker Pelosi took out of the bill yesterday? I mean, how confident is the White House that you will ultimately get that money?
Absolutely. Okay. I just wanted to let you continue. Well, we need this money. So without additional resources from Congress, the results are dire. Just to give you some specifics, in March, testing capacity will decline this month. In April, free testing and treatments for tens of millions of Americans without health insurance will end. In May, America's supply of monoclonal antibodies will run out. So failing to take action now will have severe consequences for the American people. That's why we requested $22.5 billion to avoid severe disruptions to our COVID response. The reason we've made the progress we have at this point is because we have been ahead of where the pandemic is in terms of having the preparations, for the most part, of vaccines, of supplies needed, and we want to continue to stay ahead of that if we can. So these are conversations, as you all know and has been reported out, that are happening with members, but we will need that funding in order to continue to fight the pandemic. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on Darlene, are you detecting any sign of any imminent use of chemical weapons over there?
I'm not going to get into any intelligence. Obviously, we continue to assess the declassification of that, as you know, Steve, as we have done throughout the course of the last several weeks. But what we endeavored to do when we put out that information yesterday is to remind the world of the large biological and chemical weapons program that Russia has, the fact that they have used it in the past against dissidents on their soil and on NATO soil, that they and that they were taking a step to put out misinformation about our own programs, capacities, and those of the Ukrainians as well.
And the President spoke this morning with the President of Turkey, Erdogan. Did they discuss access to the Black Sea? Do you know?
They had, I know we just put out a readout that you should all have. They had a constructive, lengthy call. I believe it was almost an hour, if not an hour. And the president is very grateful to the role that Turkey is playing and has played even earlier today in hosting diplomatic negotiations at this moment in time. But in terms of additional specifics, there's not more I can get into from here. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Thanks, Jen. I just want to be totally clear. Are you saying if Russia does conduct a chemical weapons attack in Ukraine, there will not be a military response from the United States?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. What we're saying right now is they have the capacity and the capabilities. I'm also not going to get into intelligence. But the president's intention of sending U.S. military to fight in Ukraine against Russia has not changed.
But that sounds like even if there is a chemical weapons attack, that calculus will not change. So I just want to be clear on what the U.S. response would be.
Again, there has not been a chemical weapons attack. We are conveying to all of you what the capacity and the capabilities of Russia are, what steps they have taken in the past. Let's hope we are not having a discussion about that, but the president and our NATO partners have not changed their assessment about their plans to send U.S. troops in.
Would President Biden let a chemical weapons attack in Ukraine go unanswered by the United States?
We have not let anything go unanswered that President Putin has done to date. We have not let anything go unanswered to date, any steps that President Putin has taken to date. What that would look like, I can't give you an assessment of that from here at this point.
One other question. The U.S. says their assessment is that Ukraine has planes that they could use. They don't think it would be effective to send more aircraft to Ukraine right now. Ukrainian President Zelensky has pleaded for more aircraft, saying that they desperately need it. So I guess the question is, how do you square the U.S. assessment with what President Zelensky, who is on the ground in Ukraine, says that he needs for his Air Force?
Well, I would say first the U.S. military is one of the best militaries in the world. What we're basing our assessment on is both our intelligence assessment and the assessment of our military experts, who have been, of course, in touch with their counterparts in Ukraine and our NATO allies and partners. And what they assessed was that adding aircraft to the inventory is not likely to significantly change the effectiveness of the Ukrainian Air Force relative to Russian capabilities. The Ukrainian Air Force has several squadrons of fully mission-capable aircraft, and although Russian air capabilities are significant, their effectiveness has been limited due to Ukrainian strategic, operational, and tactical ground-based air defense systems, surface-to-air missiles, and manpads. And so one of the other detail is, how are we going to continue to provide assistance that is helpful to them and most effective and most useful to them in this moment? And the assessment of our military has been that continuing to provide defensive assistance and materials in that form is what is most useful and effective at this point in time. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. Just to follow up on the COVID aid bill, you said the conversations are going on, but if this bill has the dire consequences that you just described, where else can you go to get money for testing and treatment? Is there money in other parts of the government? I mean, if there's not going to be a standalone bill that gives you it, what are you going to do?
You'd need additional supplemental assistance.
And what do you think the chances of that are?
It is essential we get that assistance, otherwise we will not be able to, as I just outlined, Mara, and I appreciate you asking the question again for further clarification, we will have to stop a number of components of our program that are essential to the American people.
So you're saying there's no way you can get money move money around that's already been appropriated?
Well, again, I think that if we had that money to move around, we would be moving it. And our assessment is that we need this additional funding in order to meet the needs of the American public. And I would also note that a lot of these programs are widely popular across the board, regardless of your political affiliation, providing antivirals, providing tests, providing free vaccines. Those are all programs that we're talking about continuing.
And I just have one more question on another subject. The administration has been criticized for putting sanctions on one dictator and then going hand in hand to other dictators like Venezuela. How do you explain that?
Well, I think our engagement with Maduro, who we don't recognize, as you know, as the leader of Venezuela, but who is detaining American citizens, was to bring American citizens home. That was our first priority in those engagements. There is not, so as you're all assessing... There are a range of topics that we discussed. Largely, the conversation was about our approach to the Western Hemisphere. Certainly, Venezuela, as you all know, is the largest producer of oil in the world. But as you're one of them in the world. Sorry, thank you. Ed gave me a funny look there. I appreciate that. One of them in the world. But part of our conversation was focused about a range of issues, including encouraging them, of course, to be engaging in steps toward peace. As you may have seen, Maduro has announced his intention to be a part of the talks with the opposition in Mexico. But as you are assessing how to spend your energies in this time of a lot of news in the world, I would not focus a lot of them on conversations about the future of the United States importing oil at this point in time. Go ahead. From Venezuela. Go ahead.
Question on the economy. The inflation numbers that we received today show consumers paying almost 8% more than a year ago, and this was before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So how much higher does the administration expect prices to climb?
Well, as you know, a large driver of these inflationary numbers from the last these monthly numbers were from energy prices, and we have seen the increase happen as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So while we're looking at year over year, and there were year over year numbers that came out about a month ago as well, there are still predictions and projections from the Federal Reserve and outside economists about inflation moderating towards the end of the year. Obviously, they make those assessments on a regular basis. But in terms of prices going up, we do anticipate that gas prices and energy prices will go up. That is something that the president has conveyed very clearly to the American public. We also believe it will be temporary and not long-lasting. And what our focus is on now is doing everything we can to mitigate and reduce those prices and ensure there isn't a longer-term impact. So I can't make new projections for you from here other than to convey that, yes, it is accurate that the invasion by President Putin into Ukraine has impacted global inflation in the United States because of the impact it's had on energy prices, and that is a significant contributor to inflation, the inflationary numbers we saw come out today.
You said this is temporary. You've noted before that inflation is going to wane or is expected to wane by the end of the year. Is that still your belief?
That continues to be the projection of the Federal Reserve, of outside economists, and we really rely on them for their projections. But there is also no question that inflation may be higher for the next few months than it would have been without President Putin and Russia's further invasion into Ukraine, particularly due to higher energy prices. And obviously they will watch that, and we are watching that, but that is definitely having an impact.
And just one more on this topic. The president said earlier this week that American companies, he sort of urged them not to price gouge. Are you aware of any price gouging in gasoline that's going on right now?
That's something we've asked the FTC to look at. They are the appropriate body. They're an independent body. So I'd point you to them for any assessment of that. But that's something we have to continue to monitor, right? We've been monitoring it. We've asked them to monitor it. But obviously, at this point in time, when Americans are paying higher prices at the pump, this is one of the areas where we need to watch closely. Go ahead.
Can I ask you about the transportation mask mandate?
Sure.
TSA says it was based on a CDC recommendation. I'm just wondering if you're in a position to explain the rationale, the science, the logic behind continuing it in places where the community level is low.
Well, I would really point you to the CDC to provide further detail. But I would note, as you know, when you get on an airplane, you travel to different places, right? You're not just static in one place, whether it's a green zone or a yellow zone or a red zone. So what they also announced is that TSA will be, that the CDC will work with government agencies to help inform a revised policy framework for when and under what circumstances masks should be required in the public transportation corridor, because it's unique, right? If we're in Washington, D.C. and we're in a green zone or a yellow zone, you can make a clear assessment. If you're moving from one zone to another and you're picking people up from one zone to another, it's a little bit different, and that requires some consultation, which is what they're going to endeavor to do between now and April 18th.
Completely separate topic. France said today that the window on an Iran deal is closing. Does the U.S. share that view? Is the sense here that Iran is trying to run out the clock?
Well, our view is that we are close. We have been close for some time now, and we also, for the last several weeks, as we've been talking about. We also all know from having been through these negotiations before that the end of negotiations is always when the difficult and challenging parts of the conversation typically take place. So I wouldn't make that assessment or echo that from here. We are continuing to have these diplomatic talks. It is in all of our interests to stay at the negotiating table, and that's what our plan is to do from here. Go Go ahead.
Jenn, you said earlier to one of my colleagues that nothing that Russia has done so far in terms of this invasion has gone unanswered when you were being asked about bio and chemical weapons. Obviously, none of what we have done to answer Russia has steered them from continuing this invasion. So why not consider some alternate strategy to communicate to Russia the consequence if they are to do a bio or chemical weapon strike inside Ukraine?
Like what?
I'm asking you, in other words, why not communicate? You won't say if it's a red line, right? Because you won't say that it's not our intention right now. So let me start there. Is there any red line for Russia that the U.S. would have some involvement where the military entered in Ukraine?
I'm not going to get into red lines from here, Peter. What I would tell you is that when I said we have not let anything go unanswered, what I mean is that we have amped up a range of military and security assistance, a historic amount to Ukraine, including a range of defensive weapons, which we've expedited the delivery. Even in the last 10 days, we've delivered about $240 million of that. And also we've provided a range of humanitarian assistance, and we have basically crushed the Russian economy, where the stock market is not even open. So it's inaccurate to suggest it's gone unanswered. We have taken all those steps and rallied the world.
And I'm not saying it's gone unanswered. You say it's gone unanswered. We've witnessed the answer in the form of sanctions. I'm saying, given the potential that you've indicated that Russia could use a bio or chemical weapons strike there, why wouldn't the U.S. communicate to them something that is not an answer, but instead preemptive, to communicate the consequence if they are to take what would be a horrific this war to a horrific new level?
The President's first and most important objective is the national security and interests of the United States, and being clear and direct with the American people. He has been clear and direct with the American people. He is not intending to send U.S. troops to fight in Ukraine against Russia, to start another war, that would be an escalatory step that would not be in our national security interests and not in the interests of NATO. What we have conveyed is Russia's capabilities, their capacities, and their pattern of using chemical and biological weapons.
And so what does he say then? That's the message to the American people. His responsibility to them, of course, is before any other. What does he say to Vladimir Putin if those at the head of the Russian government are considering that? What do you say to them watching right now?
We have been very clear, and our actions have been the evidence of this, that there will be significant consequences for every escalatory step that is taken by President Putin and the Russian government.
Follow on this then very quickly as it relates to the MiGs. You guys have said you close the door on supplying combat aircraft to Ukraine right now, the transfer of MiGs. We heard from the Pentagon, your colleague there, John Kirby, said it was high risk. Mitt Romney today said there is a sentiment that we're fearful about what Putin might do and what he might consider an escalation. It's time for him to be fearful of what we might do. Why is it not a risk, a higher risk, to wait?
To wait to what?
We're not supplying, to not act in providing MiGs to the Ukrainian country. We said that's a high risk. Why is that a higher risk than not providing them? We're already witnessing civilians die as we speak.
Well, I would say what our assessment is based on is how to prevent a world war here, Peter, which is a significant weight that the intelligence community, the Defense Department, and the President of the United States weighs at every moment in time. And they weigh, and I would note that that there was also, I thought, a very interesting comment that was made that is important, I think, for people to understand how we look at this, which is that there's an escalation ladder, right? And there's a difference between an anti-tank weapon, a shoulder-fired missile, an aircraft, and a fighter jet that could cross a border and actually conduct operations on Russian soil. So how we assess things is what kind of assistance can we provide that will be the most impactful, if humanly most impactful, in protecting, defending, providing assistance to the Ukrainian people as they are fighting courageously and boldly. We are also trying to prevent ourselves from taking steps that would be further escalatory. I don't think we have held back in any capacity in providing assistance, having the backs of the Ukrainians, but we are not going to do things that we think are not in the interest of the United States or our NATO allies, and that is where the bar is for us. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jenn. We just heard you say again that you think inflation is going to be temporary. We've heard you say that it was going to be temporary since last spring. So how long do you guys think temporary is?
Well, again, Peter, I think what we do is we rely on the assessments of the Federal Reserve and of outside economic analysts who give an assessment of how long it will last. The expectations and their assessment at this point continues to be that it will moderate by the end of the year. There's also no question that when a foreign dictator invades a foreign country, and when that foreign dictator is the head of a country that is the third largest supplier of oil in the world, that is going to have an impact, and it is.
And so to that point, inflation goes up today. The president's statement blames the Putin price hike. Are you guys just going to start blaming Putin for everything until the midterms?
Well, we've seen the price of gas go up at least 75 cents since President Putin lined up troops on the border of Ukraine.
And last month, the statement didn't mention the Putin price hike. It mentioned inflation because of the pandemic. Why is that?
Well, Peter, last 2 years, there was a global pandemic. Everyone who's global economists have all agreed that that has been the biggest contributor to date of inflation because of the impact on the supply chain. Obviously, global events impact the global economy, as well as global inflation. And the price hikes as a result that have escalated over the course of time of President Putin's further invasion of the impact on the global oil markets are, of course, having an impact.
President Biden has hosted electric vehicle stakeholders here at the White House. Would he host oil and gas producers, the people who are the most affected by the Putin price hike?
Well, the oil and gas, I have nothing to preview or predict for you in terms of him hosting oil company executives.
Is he open to that?
I don't have anything planned on the schedule for that front, but I will tell you that the president has been clear that he believes they have the tools they need, 9,000 unused permits. They have the capacity they need to go get more oil here in the United States, and he'd encourage them to do that. Go ahead.
Just one more about electric vehicles. You guys are pushing electric vehicles today. This is a president who always talks about the power of our example.
Mm-hmm.
Does he own an electric vehicle?
Presidents of the United States don't do a lot of driving.
He's posted videos where he's revving the engine of his Corvette in Wilmington. He owns cars.
And he also has driven electric vehicles as president, as to give a model to the rest of the country.
Does he own one?
I think the president's record on this is clear, Peter. Presidents of the United States, current and when they are no longer, typically are not doing a lot of driving. Go ahead.
Jenn, the Vice President expressed support for a war crimes investigation into Russia. Why at this point isn't the United States comfortable just directly labeling the bombing of a maternity hospital as a war crime?
Well, first let me say, the bombing of a maternity hospital is horrific, it's barbaric. I don't think anybody who saw that could not have been emotionally deeply impacted. There's a legal review process that the United States undergoes to make considerations of labeling something as a war crime. That is the ongoing process that we're pursuing at this point in time. It's ongoing. Obviously, if Russia is intentionally targeting civilians, that would be a war crime, but we need to go through the legal assessment and review in order to make a formal conclusion.
One more. The journal is reporting that Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman declined a request to speak with President Biden recently. Early in his term, the White House said the president would conduct diplomacy with the Saudis through the king rather than through MBS. Why has that policy changed?
That report is inaccurate, so let me start there. The president did speak with the Saudi king just several weeks ago. It's all running together at this point in time. There were no rebuff calls, period. But when he spoke with King Salman on February 9th, they talked about, and the readout made this clear, a range of issues and global issues that we can continue to work together on, including deterring Iranian-enabled attacks against civilian targets in Saudi Arabia, supporting UN-backed efforts to end the war in Yemen, ensuring the stability of global energy supplies. And the president's focus is really on our relationship moving forward, where we can work together, how we can work together on economic and national security here at home, and he looks forward to that continuing.
Does it remain the policy that he will only be conducting diplomacy through the king?
Well, he is his appropriate counterpart, but again, there are different leaders who attend different global events from a range of countries, including Saudi Arabia. So if the Crown Prince had been at any of the global events that the president had recently attended, I'm sure he would have engaged with him, but he was not. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jenn. Senator Manchin said today that he supported the Republican plan to move forward with 4 out of 5 Fed nominees. I know that you're going to say that Republicans on the Banking Committee should just get back to work and allow the entire slate to go forward, but the president also said during the State of the Union that these nominees were crucial to the fight against inflation, and we saw today, obviously, that's still a pressing concern. So I was wondering if you could walk me through why you wouldn't take what Senator Manchin called a win, get 4 of your 5 nominees. Is it because Sarah Bloom Raskin herself is crucial to this fight in inflation? Is it that you're worried about a slippery slope in the Senate? Like, why not take the 4 out of 5?
I know you give a little bit of a preview of what I might say there, but one, we don't have any change in our approach or policy here. The committee should hold an up or down vote on all 5 nominees. It is important to note that it is not a lack of votes on the committee to move these nominees forward. It is a lack of willingness of Republicans to show up to the committee to actually vote, even against this slate of nominees. That is where we have a core issue here. So we also would agree with the statements from Republicans in the Senate, like Senator Grassley, who have said that senators should not degrade their advice and consent responsibilities and should show up and do the jobs the American people pay them to do. And our hope is that Banking Committee members will show up and do their jobs and vote or not support these nominees, but allow it to move forward by meeting a quorum.
But I guess my question is, why is that core issue more important than the broader fight against inflation for you guys? What is the philosophical thing that you guys are saying it's more important than getting 4 Fed nominees on the board in a time of height of inflation?
We believe all 5 nominees are eminently qualified and should be given an opportunity to be voted through the committee, where we absolutely have the votes. Republicans are just not showing up to get quorum for that vote to move forward.
All right. On inflation, you've said obviously that the Ukraine fight is going to has already driven up gas prices and is going to contribute to inflation in coming months. I'm wondering what spillover effect you expect into the broader economy. So do you expect that this increased inflation is going to impact GDP or job growth or those sorts of things? Is that a fear that you're sort of grappling with, or are there steps that the White House is going to take to try to mitigate the spillover from inflation thing?
So we will clearly continue to monitor all of the risks and the impact. But right now, we believe the United States economy is positioned well to deal with the challenges ahead. Given, since the president took office, we've seen a historic recovery. We've added 678,000 jobs last month and 7.4 million jobs since he took office. We've seen the fastest decrease in unemployment on record and the fastest economic growth in nearly 40 years. So clearly, and you heard the President of the United States talk about this in the State of the Union, inflation and costs are an issue that we will continue to focus. It's a top priority for him. But in terms of the strength and stability of the economy, we do feel we are continue to be positioned well to deal with the challenges ahead. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask on refugees, and
Sure.
obviously there's been about 2 million people, 2 million Ukrainians who have already left the country, and I know you've said from the podium that most will likely want to stay in the area in Eastern Europe, but I'm wondering what steps would the administration consider to take in more refugees now? I know some advocacy groups have talked about, for example, admitting Ukrainians who already have pending visa applications as refugees. Are there steps that the White House, the administration would do now to admit more in the United States?
Well, there are steps which are not exactly related to refugees, but related to the Ukrainian population, including temporary protected status, which we announced and are granting for anyone who has been here since March 1st. In terms of additional steps, the reason why it's important to note that we think it's not just many, the vast majority of refugees we believe will want to stay in neighboring countries in Europe, where many of them have family, many of them have worked, many of them have friends and others. So that is our assessment. That is why we are continuing to provide humanitarian assistance to neighboring countries who are providing, who are welcoming refugees from Ukraine, who are providing them the assistance they need in this moment of time. And that's where we feel our efforts are best focused.
Jenn, can I follow up?
Yeah.
On the refugees, President Duda today, when he was speaking to the Vice President, asked if the U.S. could speed up and simplify as soon as possible the procedures for Ukrainians who want to come to the United States because they have relatives here and they want to stay here until the war is over. So is that something that the United States is considering, and how quickly do you think that the U.S. could do that?
I'm happy to check on that. I would say, again, I don't know what the numbers are in that regard, but all of our assessments from communicating with the Ukrainians, with neighboring countries, continue to be that the best way that the United States can contribute to this refugee crisis is by providing humanitarian assistance, funding to a range of countries who are welcoming refugees. So that's where our focus has been.
I also wanted to ask you about comments that Representative Madison Cawthorn made about the Ukrainian government. He said in a video that Zelensky is a thug. He said the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt. He said some other things, but he also said that Zelensky is pushing misinformation on America. Would the White House like to comment?
I would not. Go ahead.
The administration has talked a lot about short-term, waiting out short-term effects of sanctions on Russia, and so Americans might now naturally be wondering when the medium term might start. Do you have any indication at all yet that Putin is being squeezed by these sanctions, as you put it yesterday?
That any indication he is being squeezed?
Making a different decision. I mean, the messaging from the White House has been this is going to hurt, Russia's to blame. Just wait it out. What can you tell Americans who are like, well, when, how long? I mean, that's a natural question a lot would have.
Well, because of our efforts, the ruble is worth a penny. It's the lowest ranked currency in the world. The Russian stock market has not even opened. And you have seen in days, and you have seen outcry from a number of President Putin's buddies and cronies in the form of the oligarchs who we have also been squeezing. Our calculation has been that these financial sanctions and that we have rallied the world to support would have an impact. Our objective is, of course, to bring an end to this conflict. In terms of when that will happen, I'm unfortunately not in the mind of President Putin, but in terms of the impact on his financial sector, the response from people who are close to him, and frankly from the courageous outcry from thousands of people in Russia, that has been clear. When it will change his calculus, I can't give a prediction of that.
And can you talk to us a little bit about the president's engagement with senators who have met with his Supreme Court nominee, Judge Jackson? There are reports that he has made multiple calls to Senator Collins, for example. How is it going, and what is his level of engagement right now?
The president has been very closely engaged in this process, even while he is rallying the world to stand up against President Putin. He has made a range of calls over the course of time. I'm not going to confirm specifics of those from here. I would also note that Judge Jackson has been meeting with a range of members on the Hill, as you all have seen every day, including members who may not have had any record of voting for nominees of ours in the past, but she's committed to meeting with every member of the Judiciary Committee before her hearing, and she is quickly working through that. And she is also committed to meeting others beyond that period of time. And many of them have come out and spoken to her their meetings with her after that. So I think that gives the best assessment of how things are going quite well. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jenn. This morning, a bipartisan group of lawmakers sent an open letter to the president asking to invoke the Defense Production Act to increase oil production. Is the administration considering a move like that, or other conversations with industry to help lower gas prices at the moment?
Well, without ruling out or ruling in any options, let me explain to you what the Defense Production Act would do in this regard. It would basically be providing money to oil companies to do something that they already probably have the capacity to do.
Have you been in conversation with these oil companies since this latest rise of gas prices has come to increase production?
We have had senior officials in touch with oil companies, yes.
Switching gears really quickly on President Biden's conversation with the Colombian president today. As a strategic partner, in the latest talks with Venezuela, was Colombia involved in those talks about releasing Americans? And will further talks about releasing Americans from Venezuela be part of President Biden's conversation today?
I don't believe they were part of the conversation with Venezuelans, with Maduro about releasing Americans. I can certainly check on that front. We will, I'm sure, have a readout after the meeting that the president is having shortly.
And then on another migrant crisis, Colombia has obviously been dealing with their own migrant crisis coming out of Venezuela for years now. As part of these, as you've all said, that migration is going to be a major part of these conversations with Colombia, is the administration prepared to help the refugee crisis that's going on in that country and manage the outflow from Venezuela into Colombia?
Well, one, they have been a model, Colombia has in many ways, in trying to take steps not only to welcome refugees, but also to crack down in many ways on migration. That's part of the conversation that the president will have. We have provided a range of assistance in the past, but I don't believe that there's a new assistance package coming today, but that has been part of our engagement with them in the past. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Did I skip you, Ed? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
In the readout of the call between the president and Turkey's President Erdogan, wrote that the president appreciated Turkey's effort to support a diplomatic resolution. How would you characterize the White House's role today in supporting a diplomatic resolution to the crisis, if there's any role the U.S. is playing?
The U.S. is leading the global effort to rally opposition to the actions of President Putin, and we have been engaged with the Ukrainians on a daily basis. We've provided more security assistance, more humanitarian assistance than any country in the world, and there wouldn't be the unity of financial sanctions and actions without the leadership of the United States. So what we're doing is we're putting the Ukrainians in a position of increasing, hopefully, strength in their negotiations and discussions.
Is the U.S. playing any concrete role in facilitating these diplomatic talks?
We are supporting the efforts by a range of leaders, including Erdogan, including our Turkish allies, including the Israelis, including the French, and others who are engaging directly with President Putin over this.
And if I could just ask a follow-up on inflation. You've been getting questions about inflation for months.
Sure.
And you talked about a lot of work the White House is doing, but it's largely been long-term strategy, right? Supply chain work, supporting manufacturing in the U.S., semiconductors. The Americans that woke up with another round of headlines about inflation this morning, is there something you want to point to that's what the White House is doing to provide short-term relief, like immediate relief to the rising costs?
I would say that a huge part of what we've done has had an impact already. One is obviously inflationary pressures have been caused by the pandemic, and getting the pandemic under control, which has been the president's top priority, has the biggest impact on that. We've seen hospitalizations go down. We've seen people return to the workplace. We've seen 99% of schools open across the country. Also, the steps that our supply chain task force have taken have already had an enormous impact, including increasing movement through ports by, I believe, about 60%. If you look at shelves at stores right now, 89% of them are stocked. That is a direct result of the actions of the supply chain task force and this president. It is also true that while the early stages of inflationary pressures were caused by the pandemic and caused by the impact on the supply chain of that right now what we're looking at are different pressures, right? Which is the pressure of the energy sector that is a direct result of President Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And what we are doing in that regard is leading the world in responding to that and looking at every option possible, including coordinating a coordinated release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to ensure we're increasing supply to reduce prices. So I would say that there are a range of steps that have already had an enormous impact across the board on addressing inflationary pressures, but we also are dealing now with a new challenge that is why we're seeing the inflationary pressures go up. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on your point that you said that senior administration officials have been in touch with oil companies about boosting supply. I don't know unless this has been reported elsewhere. Can you say which ones and what the response is?
I'm not going to detail it further, but we've clearly met with them and remain engaged with them as we do with a range of private sector companies.
One other on Ukraine, we talked about chemical and biological weapons. As Russia appears to be moving towards encircling Kyiv itself, something that Pentagon officials, you or others have said could take several days, if not weeks. Is there concern about getting enough military equipment into Kyiv in advance of that? Or what would happen, what would be done to make sure that they can still be supplied if this encirclement happens or is underway?
Well, what we have been able to do to date is provide, even in the last 10 days since we announced this new package, about $240 to $250 million in military assistance, defensive assistance that, as we noted earlier in the briefing, is what our military has identified as most helpful to them in this moment. We also, thanks to the omnibus and the parts of many parts of that we do like, will now have about $13 billion in additional assistance, some of which we will be able to expedite and provide, hopefully, rather quickly. We have effectively and efficiently been able to provide a range of assistance to the Ukrainians, and we expect we'll be able to continue to do that.
And then there was a helpful but on background and off-camera conversation yesterday about the Colombia president's visit and details of the Venezuela engagement over the weekend. I wanted to clarify one or two things. One of the officials said that there were no talks between us and the regime. We traveled down there to secure the release of detained Americans and to urge a return to the negotiating table. So they did not speak with Maduro government officials about getting the Americans released?
Well, we were working to free American citizens. As I said yesterday, detained in Venezuela, obviously that required speaking with those who had detained them. I don't have more details on who exactly was engaged in that from the Venezuelan side.
When was the last time U.S. officials had talked to anyone in the Maduro regime or that was holding those hostages before they went to Venezuela?
You mean before they were detained in Venezuela a couple of years ago?
Before they got there this weekend. When would
It had been ongoing for months.
Okay. So the timing of this visit, I know they said in the call, for example, this was the result of months of work. Was it prompted by what's going on in Ukraine, their visit? Or was it the result of unrelated months of work? Because there are some looking at this saying they're taking advantage of the Ukraine situation, potential vulnerability, the need for oil in the global supply, not just in the U.S., but globally. This must have been one.
All right, folks. Well, that's all the news that I've got for you today on this beautiful Thursday, March 10th. Thanks for tuning in to News 3 Now. I hope that you have a fabulous rest of your day. I cannot wait for tomorrow's show. We've got so much planned. Oh, my goodness. We are so busy. Tomorrow here on News 3 Now, well, I'm going to be busy all throughout the afternoon and tomorrow morning to bring you the best News 3 Now ever tomorrow. Fingers crossed that everything goes well. No technical difficulties, please. All right, I think we got it. I think that prayer went straight to God himself, and he was like, Abigail, tomorrow's going to be a great show. Everything is going to go according to plan. It's going to be an awesome Friday and an awesome weekend. All right, y'all, with that, have a fantastic rest of your day. Can't wait to hear from you tomorrow. Yeah, that's all I got for you. I hope that you I really hope that you have a great rest of your day. If you do anything exciting, let me know. I want to know what y'all are up to. If you have anything planned for the weekend, let me know that as well. And of course, if you have a great story about someone that's doing something in the community or hosting an event, let me know. I want to hear from you, and I want to promote it right here on News 3 Now. Always remember that you are loved, and I'm happy that you're here.
Thank you for watching News 3. Local, trusted. Thank you for watching News 3. Local, trusted. Thank you for watching News 3. Local, trusted.